Hello, my name is Alex Robio, and I welcome you to our webinar with the title of The Secrets of Agile Software Development from the Executive's Perspective. We really appreciate your participation, and we're excited to have you. I'm excited to say that we have people from over 10 countries, including United States, Canada, India, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, among many others. So that's very, very exciting. I'd like to start by introducing our panel today. We're going to have Hubert Smits, who is an independent consultant, so he doesn't actually work for Bellatrix, even though we've had a chance in the past to work together on some engagements. Hubert has over 25 years of experience as a management consultant and over 10 years of experience training and applying Agile methodologies. He's worked for some of the largest companies worldwide, and he's actually been able to work with companies and actually on location at over 12 countries worldwide. So it's very exciting to have Hubert. Welcome, Hubert.
Okay, thank you.
And we are also going to have Julieta Barrionuevo. Julieta is a staff member of Bellatrix. She currently has a role of lead QA engineer. She's also a Scrum Master and a certified Scrum Master by the Scrum Alliance. She has a bachelor's degree in systems engineering, and she brings many years of experience applying Scrum and Agile methodologies, as well as more traditional methodologies. So very excited to have Julieta. Hi, Julieta. Welcome.
Hi, Alex. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
And just a little bit about myself. My name is Alex Robio, and I manage the business development area of Bellatrix. I'm also a certified Scrum Master and a huge fan of it. And my role today is to moderate the discussion and kind of guide the conversation. So before we go through very quickly through the agenda, let me tell you that we want to make this as interactive as possible. So feel free to ask questions. If you go to your GoToWebinar application, there is a questions section. Please go ahead and ask questions as they come up. We'll be reviewing them online, and if it applies and if it makes sense to answer those questions during the presentation, we'll go ahead and do so. If not, we'll leave it about 5 to 10 minutes in the end to cover any of those questions that might require a little bit deeper explanation, or that might take a little longer time. But please do feel free to ask questions, and again, if we don't get to answer some of those, we'll go ahead and answer by email. As you know, this is the second edition of this webinar. We had it about a month ago, and so we got a lot of good feedback, and we tried to apply that feedback. So what we're covering today is, as the title says, Scrum from the Executive's Perspective. We see a lot of information out there for developers, for the Scrum Masters, etc., but not so much for the executives, the ones that are going to be making decisions, the ones that are going to be choosing one supplier over the other, the ones that are going to have to approve budgets for training, for tools, etc. So we thought that it made sense to share some of our experience regarding Scrum and how it looks and what an executive should look for when applying Scrum. So we'll do a quick intro. We've got a large percentage of the attendees or executives or managers that don't have a lot of experience with Scrum, so we'll take a very quick time to go through an introduction. And then we'll jump to some of the specifics, including Scrum and contracts. How does an Agile contract look like? What are the things that you should look for? What are the things that you should look out for? We'll also cover another topic which is very important from the executive's perspective, is how do you manage requirements on a Scrum project? And last but not least, as an executive, how do I measure progress? How do I measure success? What are the tools that Scrum gives me to manage the program and the projects? So with that quick intro, I'd like to jump into our topic today. I guess, Hubert, it all starts with the Agile Manifesto. Let's do a little bit of history here. What is the Agile Manifesto?
Yes, just a few words on the manifesto, because we have a mixed audience. Some people fairly new or entirely new to Agile, and others indicate that they are experienced with it. So to bring everybody up to the same level, the Agile Manifesto, we celebrated its 10th anniversary this year, gives the basic values for any Agile project or Agile team. It talks about when projects typically run better and when they are harder. And the most important values there is that it is all about people. I usually say in my training that software development is a team sport, and a team exists of people. So that first value, that people and how they interact, how they work together, is key to me in this whole manifesto. The other values, we'll see that later when we talk about reporting and metrics and contracts, also important. But with whatever I do focus on how I can make people work together, communicate well. So when Alex and I and all the people at Bellatrix worked together in a previous engagement, I knew I would be pretty far away from them. I'm in the Boulder, Colorado area. They are in Argentina. So with every step we made in our contracts, in our progress measurements, it was always focusing on how can we make the interaction as smoothly as possible. Another thing to say there is that when we talk about that third value, customer collaboration, to me, working with an outsourced company is about customer collaboration, not so much about a contract. You can put everything on a piece of paper and sign it, but if after that both parties, the leadership of both parties, are not involved all the time in how the contract executes, how software delivery is progressing, it's not going to work. Then that contract is not going to help you, and hence choosing as one of the key topics for this 1-hour presentation to talk more about contracts. Would like to leave it here. Not enough time to go fully in depth into the manifesto, but people working together and collaboration between customer and supplier are key to me for this 1-hour session that we have here.
Perfect. Good. Just a quick question for Julieta. This idea of individuals and interactions over processes and tools, how do people work together, and how does Agile, you think, helps with teamwork and collaboration?
Well, good question. Well, as we know, Agile's for people from different backgrounds to work together in Agile teams. The question is how? Well, principally by creating a self-managed, empowered teams, and one of the things that is a key for that kind of teams is enforcing the communications. In Agile practice, that's such a release planning, sprint planning, and standard meetings provide the times and space for teams to collaborate, and principally for build relationship with each other. One of the meeting that we have every day, that is the daily standard or Scrum meetings, help to the team to identify potential collaborations opportunities that they can follow up on. So while sprint and release planning provide more structure and extending opportunity for collaboration. And also it is very helpful in every meeting that we have to use a visible chart in order to have a visibility, all of the members of the team, about the daily progress. So this is one of the tools that help a lot to see the progress. Another meeting that is at the end of the sprint is the retrospective meetings, that teams provide feedback to each chart to improve it. Teams also can evaluate the result from the sprint to determine if collaboration could produce better results. At the end of every sprint, we review or have a demo, give to the team like a sense of accomplishment and meaning about the team's work. And also that is really great, this motivates to the teams and also reinforce the collaboration or the value of the collaborations in a teamwork. When I observe Agile teams closely as a Scrum Master or QA lead, teamwork does not come easy at first when we use these kind of methodologies. It is especially difficult for people who have been working alone for a long time, or if, for example, they use a traditional methodologies, because there is a natural tendency to go back to the old ways of doing things. Also, it is really hard for managers to understand that they should give up on managing or controlling, because now it is new for Agile teams, that is, they are self-organizing. So for managers, and I have that experience, that sometimes it's hard to try to avoid the control or managing the team.
Sure, that is a good point, and so we're talking about Agile in general. Let's dig a little bit deeper, and then we'll move on to the more specific topics of the presentation. For the benefit of those in the audience, Hubert, that don't have hands-on experience or that haven't had a chance to maybe understand what Scrum is, can you give us a 1-minute overview of Scrum in terms of the interactions and how it all flows?
But Alex, how am I going to sell a 2-day Scrum Master training if I can do it in 1 minute?
That's a $1 million question.
Let me explain the key things here. If in the previous slide I spoke, and Julieta spoke about people working together as a core practice of Agile, this Scrum diagram shows the other principle. We deliver software every 2, 3, or 4 weeks. We deliver software really quickly, really fast, and we grow the software solution. No longer huge stacks of design documents up front, but a list of things to do, product backlog, and then working through that list from high priority to low priority. So we always work for the most important features for the customer as a team. That leads to a question as to why such a simple framework, because really there's nothing much more to Scrum than this simple framework to every month, every iteration, every sprint, do a little bit of planning, take the most important features, then work for a month, and at the end show to your customer what you built. Why such a simple framework could fail. And things I've seen all too often, and that I think for people in the leadership team, things important to be aware of is that if you don't communicate well, this is not really going to work. It's so intense that you have to have people communicating, but if you then don't co-locate them, if you have half your team in Argentina or in Bulgaria or in India, and your other half sits somewhere in Boston in the US, it gets hard to talk, hard to communicate. You have to solve those problems. You have to make some principled choices here to co-locate your team. All too often I see that as a source of problems. Not implementing this whole process. It's so simple, so small, and still I see customers leaving steps out. Then it's going to go wrong. It's key that you deliver or that you implement the whole team. And for management, again, important to pay attention to what's learned during those 4 weeks. On the last day and on the right-hand side of the slide, it talks about a retrospective, an inspection of how the 4-week iteration went. That inspection and following up on any of the problems that are highlighted by the team is key for management. If they do not pay attention to the problems that occurred in the 4 weeks and don't help the team solve those problems, Scrum implementations don't go well.
So, as an advice, Hubert, for the executives in the audience, what would you say is is the biggest mistake executives make, and how can they prevent those mistakes from happening when applying Scrum?
I think there's two basic mistakes. One is to see Scrum as an activity for the engineers, for the programmers, testers, if you like. That's not right. It goes through the whole cycle of a project, including the product managers, and all too often executive is part of the product management team. They own, they demand, they request the high-level features. Those should arrive in that same regular pattern, not as a big chunk up front and then go for a year, but in smaller chunks every 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. And the other thing is what I just said, not paying attention to what a team learns, what the team has problems with in a month, and not helping the team solving those problems. Those things are key to me in a Scrum implementation.
Perfect. Good. Well, it took us a little longer than 1 minute, Hubert, but that's okay.
Okay.
Okay, so let's jump on to our next topic here, the boring part, which not a lot of people except the lawyers enjoy. The contracts. I guess every engagement has to have some kind of a written agreement between the parties, and so as an executive, when you're looking at vendors, when you're looking at engagements, we think it's important for you to understand the different options that you're going to see out there. So for the benefit of simplifying the discussion, of course there are a lot of gray tones, but we're going to make it pretty black and white here. We've divided the contracts in 3 different groups or different types. We have what we call the fixed cost and many times fixed scope kind of contract, the times and material, and Agile with service level agreements. I guess the highlights of each one of them is the fixed cost. In general, what it does is it puts puts limits on what the project is going to be, and also in what how much it's going to cost. In general, the billing is tied to specific milestones or deliverables. On the times and materials side, it's more of a staffing or staff augmentation approach, where the client engages a team of a number of people, and it's usually billed by the hour, usually on a monthly basis, but not, most often not really tied to specific milestones. On the other hand, an Agile agreement with a service level agreement, it also uses times and material billing in the sense that you're being billed by the hour, but it also includes a component of performance tracking with rewards and penalties for each sprint. So what are the pros and cons of each one of these models? First of all, let me say that I'm biased. My preference, and I've been in this activity on both sides, on the vendor side and on the client side. And in my experience, fixed cost is, it actually can put you in a position where you think you're managing your risk, that you have predictable costs, and you're passing a lot of the risk to the vendor. So that seems like a pro for it, or a benefit. But in reality, what I've ended up seeing is that in general, what you get is a very, very tight and not flexible agreement or relationship in general. So even if you're very successful and you're able to specify exactly what you want up front, and the vendor does a very good job, what ends up happening is that you get what you needed 12 months ago, 24 months ago, and not what your business needs now. So that to me is one of the biggest disadvantages, is that it's hard to make a fixed cost agreement be agile and really turn out the deliverables that you need now instead of what you needed a long time ago. And then on the times and materials side, that puts a lot more control on the client side, which is good. It's simpler to negotiate because you only have to agree on rates and resource dedication. It gives you a lot of flexibility, sometimes too much flexibility, but it also gives you very high visibility. You're in charge, basically. So you know what people are doing. If they're doing a good job, you know what people are doing. You know if they're working, if they're doing a good job or not. But it does get a little bit harder to manage performance. And it requires a lot more involvement on the client side. So since I've had a chance to negotiate and implement an Agile agreement with the service level component, I'd like to have Hubert maybe explain what were the the pros and cons of that agreement in the context of the work we did together.
Yes, indeed, in that situation where Alex and I work together, it's actually interesting to call that working together, because I was the customer, I was buying the services, and Alex and Bellatrix was providing them. Still, the key was that we were indeed working together to get an agreement in place that would avoid the cons from the fixed cost and the time and material. Fixed costs, it's often done to move all the responsibilities and all the risks to the partner side in the contract. But indeed, as a result, getting change into your contract is hard, and change is that what we need almost daily, but certainly on a monthly basis. There is change in your requirements for one reason or the other, and that's where the negotiations restart, and that's exactly what you don't want. That's why that fixed cost is, I think, just an idea. The cost will go up because there is a change and you have to pay for your changes. On the other hand, the time and material moves all the management to the customer. Has to manage the people, has to manage the content, has to manage the dates, the timelines. Neither great, because you were outsourcing, you were working with a partner to get help there. You don't have the people, or you don't want to have the people, and you still have to manage them. And on top of that, they are many miles away. How to manage that in the first place if you can't talk to them every day, if you can't see what's happening? Agile, I think, the way we implemented it, the way I like to implement it and have done it numerous times in small, medium and very large contracts, seeks the middle ground. I seek a contract where I outsource teams. I am buying or hiring teams from the partner and give them an amount of work where I remain responsible for the content of the work. And it is exactly the responsibility I want to have, because the results, the working software that comes out of the collaboration with the partner is key to me. Just getting software that I spec'd 12 months ago is not good enough. I want the right software, so I want to retain ownership. I don't want to have a huge design document handed over to my partner and then have no say in the changes. I want to keep owning that. That gives me a responsibility also for the dates. If I fiddle with the content, with the scope, then I have to also fiddle, and it sounds a bit funny, I know, but then I also have to own the dates, the impact of the changes on the delivery dates. And that's where management, leadership has to be aware that software development is often about change, that they have to manage and own the change, and with that, the dates. Now, on the other hand, we did outsource, we did hire teams, and we want to get something out of that. And that's where I make the partner responsible for predictability, for getting the most out of the teams and having that done in a measurable way. Agile Scrum provides me with a tool there. I can do every iteration, I can measure how much they did. And if that deliverable, that velocity as we call it, fluctuates a lot, I'm not happy. I'm going to talk to my partner and say, how can we make that velocity predictable? How we can make it stable? What can we do to increase the velocity if I think that it's too low? So that's where the partner work sits for me. What I typically do is focus my agreement, my contract on velocity, a velocity increase. That's where I'm happy to pay the team a bonus. If I get month-on-month more work done, I'm happy to pay them for it. And on the other hand, have a penalty in it if velocity decreases, because that shows problems in the relationship, problems that executive has to be aware of and has to address. And the only other thing I could say there is to keep it simple. 30, 40, 50 page contracts are usually not doing the right thing for me. If the core can fit on 2-3 pages, I'm a whole lot happier. It's a whole lot easier to manage it. What do you think, Alex? Did you like it, what we set up between you and I when we did business together?
It has worked quite well. I guess what we have learned from that experience, and we've been applying this concept for a longer time now, is the last line there is extremely important, keeping it simple. And that's a challenge. You know, it's very easy to start complicating the model and get it to the point where, you know, it's so hard to apply that it doesn't motivate people to do a good job, which in the end is what you want. So I guess that's one thing. The other one is that it's not for every client, and it's probably not for every partner or vendor. We have clients that we wouldn't be able to do this just because they don't have the consistency of applying Scrum properly on their side. And that's extremely important because a key concept that you mentioned, Hubert, is velocity. And for a team to be able to measure velocity consistently, everyone has to play a role. And that's also another lesson that we have learned. We thought that we had something that could be applied throughout all the relationships, when in reality it only works well if both the client and the partner are dancing to the same music, I guess. So those are the lessons that we have learned from the provider side. Good. So leaving the contract side, and again, please feel free to ask any questions on the chat area of the GoToWebinar app. We'll be more than happy to take them as we go or answer them in the end. But like I said, we want to make it interactive. We don't unmute everyone just because it would get too complicated to manage the conversation. But we want to give you a voice, so please feel free to use that feature. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about another aspect that is many times not paid attention to on the executive side. As an executive, what are the things that I can do in regards to requirements that can have an impact? So let's start by one concept here that I think is extremely interesting. When we're talking about requirements, and that leads to, of course, planning how to manage those requirements and when to get them implemented. And it reminds me of something I heard, which was that some people think that Agile in general and Scrum in particular is a methodology where there's no planning. I've heard that criticism from people saying, I don't like Agile because there's not enough planning. It's just, anything goes approach. I'd like to debunk that myth here and actually use a work or a white paper that Hubert wrote a few years ago that talks about planning in depth. Hubert actually talks about 5 levels of planning. So not only there's a lot of planning, there's actually 5 levels of planning in Scrum. What are those levels, Hubert?
The way I look at planning in Agile projects, where if you think back to that slide where we showed the Scrum framework, every month we deliver a piece of software, and the principle of planning in Agile projects is planning to replan. We know as a customer that we will change our minds, that we have to respond to market changes, to new ideas, to what competition is doing. So the way I look at it is that, yes, the customer has got a big idea, a vision as I call it. Where do we want to be a year from now? But rather than kicking off that whole idea all at once and writing detailed design and kicking off a project to deliver that whole idea in one big massive project with dozens of people involved, let's go step by step. Let's chop up the big idea into a number of steps, a roadmap, and a delivery schedule with a horizon not a year away, which is way too far away to be reliable. There's too much change, like I argued. But with horizons of about 3 months. Let's make 3-month chunks and set out for each chunk what we want to achieve there, so that when one part is delivered, we can consider any change we want to make in our big plan and adjust our roadmap that little bit that we need to adjust it. Each chunk, a bit an inelegant way of calling it, consider that a release. Could be an internal release, but a piece of software that really hangs together and can play a role, can have an importance maybe for your end customers, maybe within the organization. But release planning is when the whole team comes on board and everybody involved in delivery starts planning the work. Now we have detailed requirements for the next 3 months only. Within a release we've got multiple sprints, multiple iterations. Every iteration starts with a planning session with the whole team, so that even within a release, if you as a customer require change, you can move it in. There's no hurt, there's no damage. Change is a whole lot easier in a Scrum environment than it is in a waterfall. And then you must know, if you're in IT long enough, that even with a good plan that's made, that's written by the whole team, things go wrong. There's always something going wrong. The daily meeting that Julieta mentioned early on in her explanation of Scrum is where the team finds out what's going right, what's going wrong, and how do they have to adjust their daily activities to come up with the best possible result at the end of the sprint. So those are key things to me, where the customer and also leadership of a customer has to be aware that they are continuously involved. It's not a throw requirements over the wall kind of scenario and a year later we get our software back. They are involved all the time, very intensely, and are responsible to get the best possible product out of the project. I think I'm going to leave it to that, Alex. Maybe Julieta's got more to say about this.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask Julieta, as a Scrum Master, your experience practicing Scrum, what are some of the things that you see in Scrum that are practices that really work? What are the things that really add value in the relationship with the customers?
Okay, well, as you mentioned, as a Scrum Masters and also as QA, I could see that, for example, involving in early testing and in early acceptance, customer teams and QA, really work. And also, for example, having a customer in daily stand-up meetings, in planning meetings, and all of the meetings that are involved with the teams, it's great that we can have him, the person, the lead of the requirements, present on that meetings. I don't have very good experience because when I work with teams that don't keep constant communication with customers, I could see several misunderstandings. Principally about the requirements. Sometimes I could see situations that customers change the course of the sprint or the goal in general, principally, or some changes in the requirements. That means adding new features, removing features. That really, it's caused really problems to the teams because teams sometimes was working in that way, and now we need to have a new approach. For example, in daily meetings, teams can, as Hubert mentions, team have a news about how is the process, how is the progress. Sorry. So if the teams were facing some problems for implementations, the customer should know about it, because sometimes the customer need to have a trust about how the team is going or how the team is working. And if they have problems, it's good that everybody, the whole team, is involved in that problem. So as conclusion, pro owners or customers disagree or concern about the product quality. So what is the problem? That probably at the end of the sprint everything is okay, but sometimes the customer is, when see the final products, probably he's concerned or probably disagree about the product quality at the end of the sprint. So Agile meeting is another chance for the pro owner and customer and the team to inspect and adapt. And as a result, being present on this ceremony, because it's a ceremony for me, is a key for having a better product at the end of the sprint.
Perfect. Thank you, Julieta. So we've been talking about requirements, and Scrum calls them calls requirements something kind of funny or different from other methodologies. So what are user stories, Hubert? Could you give us a quick idea of what they are and how do we use them in Scrum?
Yes, and you need a really quick introduction. Rather than writing long documents with the requirements, Agile has that value where they say people interacting, talking, communicating is more important, has more value than big piles of documentation or a lot of process. User stories is the extreme version of a requirement. Rather than writing a document where the BA, the business analyst, tries to predict all the questions from the developer, you just write 1-2 sentence requirement and invite the developer to come and talk about that requirement, to drive out the details where the developer really has got questions. Leads to a lot of communication and has the risk that you have very little documentation. You have to manage both. You have to manage getting the right documentation out of the development process and be very clear about what you as a customer need there. But it also leads to a lot of communication, so you have to have the customer people who own the requirements available pretty much all day long to talk with the development teams. So distributed teams, and if you're working with a distributed partner who's several time zones away, be aware of it, that communication still needs to happen. There's no replacement for it. I'm going to keep it to that, Alex. Keep it short and sweet for this one.
So I guess to keep this perspective of the executive, again, the role of the executive in this case is to make sure that we're not overspending efforts on writing very detailed requirements up front, and also making sure that we are writing something and that we're managing those user stories. Correct, Hubert?
Yes, that's correct. And just as important, enable and even push your product people, your product management people, for their availability. All too often I come into scenarios where an excellent partner has been selected with excellent people on the delivery teams, but the customer representatives don't want to get into a meeting before 9 o'clock in the morning because they want to have reasonable working times. But if your partner is 10, 12 time zones away, that doesn't work. It's midnight for them. How can you communicate? Those people out there in India, China, Philippines want to have a life as well. So management pushing, yes, for the right level of detail in those stories at the right time, but also pushing and enabling communication.
Perfect. So for Julieta, let's talk a little bit about an interesting concept that we hear about in Scrum. What is this idea of backlog grooming? What is it, and what kind of meeting it is, and what happens during those meetings?
Okay, well, about backlog grooming, I think that it's really important that we have a pro owner involved in that meetings, and then the team, how the team should be really commitment about that meetings. So sometimes we need to have information about what is the backlog, and then if we have, for example, in my case as QA, I have a very good experience having QAs involved with working together with the pro owner to see, for example, sometimes developers are rushing to coding, and if we have a person that is in chairs or have a meeting with permanent meeting with the pro owner to see the requirements, and also to see what is going to be the next steps. Sometimes when we finish in a sprint, and we need to be very careful about the next sprint. So having a pre-planning meeting to discuss which are going to be the future of the user story that we are going to take in the next sprint is a very good strategy. So sometimes we have a meeting that we discuss with the pro owner, which are the questions that we have about the previous sprint, so we can have an analysis before to start working on the backlog. So we can have an overview about how is going to be the backlog for the next sprint. So that is really good because we can also improve our estimations, and then we can have probably anticipate to the questions or to have a visibility, to better visibility to the next sprint. So for me, the key here, and also I think that Hubert mentioned, is to have a whole team together working closely with the pros owner and the customers.
Perfect. Good. So let's go over another topic that is of a lot of interest to executives. Metrics. If one thing that I've heard from people that start getting into Scrum is, wow, it's not as simple or as easy as I thought. There's a lot of planning involved. I need to really be involved as a customer, as a client. So why should I even do it? Why not just go back to the classic methodology? And what I answer to that is, first of all, it's been proven by independent researchers that Agile projects deliver software to market about 37% faster than traditional methodologies. So that's a huge advantage. But to me, as an executive, the other factor in considering Agile has to do with the visibility. The ability to make informed decisions as to whether I start marketing my solution, as to whether the solution will come out on time, and also to make decisions as to whether I should cut the scope of the project. So why don't we take a look at some specific metrics and artifacts that we can expect to see in a Scrum project. Let's start with the individual burndown chart. What are we seeing, Julieta? What is the individual burndown chart?
Okay, well, individual burndown charts is used for every member of the team to follow the daily progress. I have used in the last project I am working, and they are really useful for me as a Scrum Master, and principally for me as a QA, to evaluate my individual progress or the progress that the members of the team are having. So how can I visualize? In the chart you can visualize our to-do progress, all the remaining time that I have for my work or for all my tasks. You have the ideal burn-down rate, and also the list of the tasks that were assigned to you in the selected iteration or in the selected sprint. These charts can be used principally to gain visibility into your progress. Also to see the relative to the times remaining to the iteration. So easily you can immediately see when you are starting to lag behind, so that you can make, so also in that time you can make some adjustment to your time, to the time management, or seek help as early as possible. So it's very useful for as a Scrum Master to have this visibility in every day. In our meetings, sometimes you have the burn-down chart for teams, and also it's good if one of the person is talking to review his the personal burn-down chart, so that to also see the team progress and see that if the person is having some problems. In that case, you can ask why he is having problems with the time that he estimates. So in this case, you can have early escalation, give to the team the best chance to recover in the meetings.
Perfect. So this is at the individual level.
Yeah.
And then we have a different view more on at the group level. So what are we looking at here, Hubert? We have the team burn down. What does that mean?
Indeed, we can scale this measurement of what's left to do. What Julieta was talking about is for an individual in a team, what do I have left to do in the rest of my month of sprint work? And for the customer, a more interesting question is, and what's left to do for the whole team? Because the whole team is responsible to deliver the working software. An individual might run the programming or might run the testing, but only when the programmer and the tester are done, we've got working software. And there's probably a whole lot more to do, but keep my example simple here. So a burn-down chart shows what the whole team has got left to do, the red line, and in order to finish with all the work that they set out to do during their sprint planning day. They looked at the requirements, they agreed with the customer what they would be delivering, what would be most important to do in the next month, and now they're tracking whether they're going to make that, the red line. And every time they're delivering a feature, there's a little hooray going on in the team, I guess, and that blue line shows that they really have delivered something. That's the value that's delivered. The information is measured on the secondary axis. Not going into the term story points here, it's a way of measuring the value that's been delivered. But that combination, we're delivering value, the blue line, and the remainder of what has to be delivered, the red line, seems to be fitting in the remaining amount of time, is what's an indicator to me as a customer that we will be successful. Now, if I may continue here, Alex, that's only one sprint, and if we're running 5, 10, 15 teams in parallel to deliver a product increment, and we're going to take a year to deliver it, then 1 month per team is probably too narrow a scale for me as a customer to look at. When I was in the role of a project director, I looked at all the teams, and I wanted to see that all the teams together would deliver my project goal at the end of my release date. I'm trying to explain that in this slide here. Any project, top left in the slide, has a goal, has got a number of requirements to deliver, which we can measure in an abstract size. Again, I'm not going to dive deep there. And that delivery has to be done on a certain date. On the bottom right, the May 13 date. That's a classic definition of a project. Deliver all the requirements on a projected date and we're successful. In an agile project, I can go from sprint to sprint, and since every sprint delivers working software, I can measure whether we delivered enough working software with the team to finish on time. That's the red line. And if that red line is trending off from the green line, I'm going too slow, as in this picture, I can see early on that I have a problem and that I need to do something. And this is key to me in a leadership role, that I know early in a project that I'm in trouble, if I'm in trouble in the first place. This sounds like a pretty pessimistic prediction that every project will go into trouble, and no, certainly don't have to. But if it goes into trouble, I want to know it early, and not, as so often happens in waterfall projects, somewhere in the last month, here's this project manager showing up with a red hat and saying, oh my gosh, we're too late, we're not going to make it. Yeah, and then panic strikes and my project is just going to run over and we get really ugly discussions. No, I want to see it early, and if it's early, I can do things to resolve the situation. That's what I'm trying to show here in this metric for larger projects.
You know, this is a beautiful chart in the sense that it really, I think, to me, having been in product management positions and having been in charge of, delivering working software, having this information early on is really a dream come true. So to me, I guess this is the most important reason as an executive to choose Scrum or Agile methodologies over other ones. I know that other methodologies try to predict, but in our experience, Agile really lets you be a lot closer to reality than what you see in the other cases. So before we start taking a few questions, let's look at one final metric here, Julieta. Product quality metric. What are we looking at here?
Okay, here we have a chart that probably we use as in QA to see what is the amount of defect that we have by sprint. It's good when we finish a sprint to see what was the amount of defect that we can find, or what is the status of the application at the end of the sprint. Just to be brief explanation, I think that our role as QA changed. So when having a strong QA role that coordinates developers with early deliveries and also provide an early feedback, I think is one of the key to avoid a several amount of defects. If you have my role, a QA role in another teams that use traditional project, one of the things was, well, you have to find a lot of defects because it's going to be the best way to have a better quality. In that case, what is the key for this kind of team? You have to coordinate with your team and first have early deliveries, have a lot of conversation if you have defects to avoid that problem at the end of the sprint. I could see in project that we can minimize the amount of defects, having a lot of conversation with the developers and trying to have early deliveries to make sure that QA can have early vision about what is the application, and then we can have a better result at the end of the sprint. And also, that is really important, now we don't have just QA as a tester. We need to have whole team commitment about the quality, having developer testing, having the pro owner testing. That is really good to have a better quality at the end of the sprint. So these kind of charts can minimize if we have better communications and also whole team commitment about the quality.
To add to that, if I may, just measuring progress and velocity is not enough. You run the risk that your delivery teams are just going as fast as they can, but ignoring the quality. And that's what I try to illustrate in this graph. This was a huge project, ran for many, many sprints. The numbers at the bottom are sprints. And what you see is that the number of defects per sprint are going up and up and up and up and up. This is a disaster in a project.
Yes.
This cannot be maintained, and is sometimes caused by an over-focus on just the velocity.
Yeah,
I'm going to give it back to Alex now.
Good point. Thank you, Hubert.
Alex, we can't hear you.
Oh, I have muted myself.
Yep, okay.
So that I wouldn't interrupt you. One question we get here from the audience is, what does 700 defects mean here? What are we measuring? Is it open bugs? Is it, you know, what are we counting here?
Yes, it is. It is. I'm not too interested in how many bugs are discovered during a sprint. My aim is that any bug discovered during a sprint gets fixed in a sprint. I want to have 0 defects at the end of a sprint as an aim, as a goal. I'm enough of a realist to know that there could always be something. But what it shows here is that from sprint to sprint, the number of open defects increases. So 30, those were 2-week sprints, 34 sprints in or so, I had something like 700-800 defects in my new system. Yeah, that I'm not happy with. That's just way too much to go live with. I have to have a downward trend. And when I started to own this project, I started to manage the quality and manage to, with the teams of course, to reduce the defects, to create a downward trend there.
Perfect, thank you. Another question is, what best practices have you seen to get over the first couple of sprints? You know, when the team is still in the learning curve and timelines are harder to establish and complete. Are there any best practices, Hubert, that you can recommend to go over that chasm of the first few sprints?
That's a great question. I'm really happy that that came up, and that goes back to probably to the core of this presentation, which has the title Agile Software Development from the Executive's Perspective. If your teams, your product people, your product managers, your delivery teams, your testers, if everybody is embracing a new approach which is really different from anything they've done in the past, a new approach to software development, you can expect that things go wrong, that it won't go all smoothly from day one. This is where management, leadership team has to step in and say, we have a need to do something different, to move away from that waterfall, because it was not all that successful for us. In order to become more successful, I will help the team, I will support the team, I will allow them to make the mistakes that they have to make to learn, and so that they get through those first 3, 4, 5 sprints. After that, I expect that they've worked through the pain, through the questions, and they've got a velocity going up and a bug count, a defect count going down. That's what I would say in just a minute.
Perfect. And we have, thank you so much, Hubert, for taking that one, and we've run out of time. We really appreciate the audience for participating and also for attending our webinar today. We'll be following with an email with some material that we have covered in the webinar, as well as a recording in case you need to take a look at any portion in particular. Thank you, Hubert, for your time today, and thank you, Julieta, for sharing your experience with us. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Okay, thank you everybody. Bye-bye.